I read 75 books in 2025, and here are my top 10. Okay, so actually I don't have 10. I have 9 5 stars right here from 2025, as well as some honorable mentions that were pretty close to a 5 star. I'm gonna go in order of how I read them. I don't have the best memory, so these descriptions are not very good, but just know that all of these books are amazing. These books made my reading year so incredible. Starting strong, in January, I read Frederick Bachman's Beartown trilogy, and the way that trilogy and that story and those characters still hold the biggest piece of my heart ever is insane. Specifically, the second book in the trilogy, Us Against You. I could cry literally just thinking about it. I love the entire series, but oh my gosh, if this isn't the most 5 star read I've ever read. I sobbed probably a million times while reading this. This book will make you so emotional, but you will love these characters so much. If you don't know, Beartown is the story about a town that is very much ice hockey obsessed. It doesn't follow one character or 2 characters. They do have kind of main characters, but truly it follows the whole town. It follows all of the characters. The first book in the series starts with an event that happens that shakes up the whole town and really affects the hockey season. And the reactions of the town to that event is pretty much the whole premise of the story. I can't really give too much away without spoiling all of it, but I'll just say that this book is a continuation of the first book following those events, and then obviously there is more events. This second book brings in their rival hockey team and adds a whole other element to the story, but the hockey is not what makes these books amazing. It is the characters, it is the family, it is the friendships, it's the emotions. These books are just so incredible, and Frederick Bachman truly knows how to write a book. He is probably one of my favorite authors of all time, and I will read anything that he writes. I love Frederick Bachman, and I love this book. And I just want to say, I will be telling you my favorite book of the year at the end of this video, but this book was a top contender for that. And that is so hard when you have multiple 5 star reads. So I started off my year amazing with Beartown and the rest of that trilogy, but then I decided I need some nostalgia in my life. So I went back and I read all of the Hunger Games books, and truly Hunger Games, the original, the first one, it's just so classic, it's just so nostalgic, and it's just so beautifully written. I talk about this all the time. I don't think anyone can write a better YA dystopian book than Suzanne Collins. This book, this trilogy, the original trilogy, is the most perfectly well-written dystopian book that I've ever read. The way the characters are so complex and the issues and the people are so complex, yet it's made for children to understand, is just insane. I mean, I read this at 12 years old, and I don't think I fully grasped everything. I didn't really understand what Suzanne's goal was with writing these, but I just loved them so much. I loved the characters so much. I loved Katniss, I loved Rue, I loved Peeta. But as an adult, reading these is a whole other experience where you fully grasp everything that Suzanne was trying to tell you through her writing, and you see the complexities of all of these characters. You see how Katniss never wanted any of this. She didn't want to be the Mockingjay. She didn't want, like, it's all just so much more symbolic and intricate and just so impressive that she wrote this book for children, and it still hits the same when you're an adult. If you don't know, which that would be kind of insane because everyone knows, but it's a dystopian book that chooses 2 kids from each district every year to participate in the Hunger Games, where they fight till their death until there is one standing who wins the Hunger Games. And that is pretty much the entire premise of the book and kind of all you need to know to get into it. But truly, there is just so much more to it, and this is and always will be a 5-star book for me. The next book I read this year that was a 5-star for me was The Conditions of Will by Jessa Hastings. I love the Magnolia Parks series, specifically the Daisy Hates books, and in my opinion, this book is very similar to Daisy Hates in a lot of ways, with the toxic family and then also her being very intelligent in some aspect. And I just really couldn't put this book down. I don't think there's anything specific about this book that makes it a 5-star besides the fact that I just couldn't stop reading it. I didn't want to stop reading it. I needed to know what was going to happen next. The drama, the tension, and even just like the plot twist that came up in this book made it just such a fun time to read, as well as it was pretty emotional, discovering everything about this family and, you know, hoping for more for Georgia. And I really fell in love with Georgia as a character, and I just had such a good time reading this book. This book follows Georgia, who is she is a professional lie detector and body language analyst, and she is from extremely traditional and extremely toxic family. And this book just follows her when she goes home for her father's funeral, and she is forced to face a lot of her trauma and her past revolving around her family and how her dad treated her and how her family still treats her, while also uncovering a lot of family secrets that kind of change a lot of the ways in which she feels and deals with her trauma and her past. I don't know what about this book resonated with me, but it really did, and I love this book, and I did give it 5 stars. Okay, my battery died, so if the angle changed, sorry about that. The next 5-star book I have for 2025 is also a contender for my favorite book of the entire year, which was The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. This is a phenomenal book. It is a gothic, or what would it be called? I think it'd be considered gothic. It is a gothic fantasy, romantasy actually. It follows a diviner named Sybil. Diviners are dreamers that are used to tell people their future, basically. And one day, all of her fellow diviners start disappearing. She is forced to go seek help from a very rude but also extremely handsome knight named Roderick. Roderick, and the king are then set on this journey where Sybil finally discovers some answers about her past and what could have been her future. Throughout the process, she does fall in love, and she also finds a group of people to call her family. This book was just so beautifully written. It was entertaining and hilarious while also being devastating, and it was just so amazing. It was the most beautifully written book I think I've ever read. The atmosphere was just so real. You were like fully immersed in this world that she created and these characters and the found family aspect. I just truly loved this book so much, and I highly recommend it to anyone and everyone. Also, the gargoyle in this book is 100% my favorite character of the entire year. I loved the gargoyle so much. It just such a good addition to the story. The perfect amount of humor to add in to this oftentimes devastating book. But I loved it so much. Truly one of my favorites. You'll see at the end of this video, I will be telling you which book out of my favorites is my absolute favorite of the year, and you'll see this one is definitely up there and possibly the one. Okay, this next book I actually just now changed to a 5-star. I filmed my video of all of my 2025 reading statistics, and I said I only had 8 5-star reads for the year, but just now as I was looking at my 5 stars, I realized one was missing, and then I realized I only gave this 4.5 stars, but I have not stopped thinking about this book. So obviously it has to be 5 stars. This book is Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlino. I think I remember that I gave this 4.5 stars because I didn't love the ending, but the way these characters have stuck with me, the way I've not stopped thinking about this book and the way it was written and the way they loved each other is insane. So I just knew I had to up this to 5 stars. I mean, I was literally searching through my 5 stars like, wait, where is Before We Were Strangers? That was one of my favorite books of the year. So obviously I upped it. It is now 5 stars. This book follows Matt and Gracie as they fall in love in college and then are separated in their adulthood, but then find their way back to each other. The way this story is written is just so beautiful. The innocence of them falling in love with each other and the way that was written was just so pure. And I can truly never stop thinking about that portion of the book. It is just so real and honest. I feel like these characters truly just felt like the most real characters that I've ever read about. And then their separation and their way back to each other is also so interesting because a lot of times I hate that in a book, but in this book it just made so much sense. It was a miscommunication trope, but it made sense for it to happen the way it did. There was no lack of respect or care for the other person, and that is so important to me. Once I see that in a book, I just don't even want to read it anymore. But this was such a beautifully written book, and I love this couple so much. I can't even explain it. This book is a must read. Okay, this next book, I don't know why I haven't read it before, but I finally read it this year and it is absolutely a 5-star book. That is The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry. I had such an amazing time reading this book. It was written so beautifully and I love books that are about books. And you know, this was a very tragic book and it had such a tragic beginning and ending, but the way it is written is just, I didn't even cry. I wasn't even sad. It was just so beautiful and emotional, but the characters made you feel like everything was okay. And if I had to describe this book, I would say it's like drinking a cup of hot chocolate. It just makes you feel so warm and cozy inside, and I just loved it. I just loved this book so much. I don't really know how to explain this book. I would say it's just a book about a man's life who experiences a tragedy that turns into one of the greatest experiences of his life. And that really describes it in the best way I know how. Now this one is very controversial, but I don't care. I loved it. People Watching by Hannah Bonham Young. I gave this book 5 stars and I don't regret it, but I have seen a ton of criticism on this book that I do actually really understand and partially agree with, but to me it didn't affect the rating because it just made sense to me. It made sense for the plot, it made sense for the characters. But the main reason I gave this a 5 stars is just because I loved it. I loved reading it. I was so entertained. I loved the characters. I felt like their relationship was just so real and they were honest with each other and they took care of their families and their families took care of them and each other. And it just felt like this book just feels like home, and I just had such a great time reading it. And I honestly wish Milo would stop getting so much hate because he's not that bad. He just has a troubled past. This book follows Prudence and Milo, and Milo has a very traumatic past, and Prudence has a mother that has Alzheimer's, and she is taking care of her mother in her young adult life. She's living with her parents at home, and she kind of gave up a lot of her dreams to stay home and make sure her mom is okay, while Milo has been traveling the world and basically running from his problems. He takes a break from running away to be there for his siblings in a time of need, and during this time, him and Prudence meet. They both have traits that the others need out of life, and they are put in a situation where they are basically entering into an agreement to help the other accomplish these things. And it was one of my favorite books of the year and one of my favorite couples that I read about this year. This next book is also a contender for my all-time favorite book of 2025. It was the most devastating, heartbreaking book that I read all year, and that was Alchemized by Senlin Yu. The way this book destroyed me was so insane. I still cannot believe the ending of this book. I had so many ideas of how this book was going to end, and the way it ended was not one that I could have ever imagined. This book was such a roller coaster of emotions. It was so dark, it was so devastating, but there was these moments and glimmers of hope that just kept you going and made you feel the way the characters felt in those moments. And I can't believe how beautifully written this book was. It is a almost 1,000-page book, and every single page was necessary, and honestly I would have read 1,000 more to continue being with these characters even in the darkest moments. This book follows Helena in a war-torn country where she is a very powerful healer and alchemist, and she finds herself in a position of having lost her memory of the war, but knows that her memory holds a key piece of information that is very important to her side's success in this war. And that is pretty much the premise of the story. She gets sent to Kane, who is the High Reeve, and his job is to basically recover her memory, but he is working for the opposite team, so she is doing everything in her power to prevent him from uncovering these memories, but she also can't remember these memories, so she doesn't even know why she is hiding them. It is so interesting, and the way the story is told puts you in Helena's perspective because you don't know what happened before either. So you're in the story and you're just as clueless as her, and as she's finding out things that happened, you are too, through her memory loss. And I just think that was so interesting. But more importantly, this book was devastating, and it was tragic, and it was almost too dark to read in a lot of moments, but so worth it to know these characters and to know this world and to see this side of, I mean, obviously this is fantasy, so it's not realistic, but this side of what wars can be and what wars are in a lot of ways. I truly loved this book so much. And last but not least, I did start reading Harry Potter in 2025, and one of my favorite books of the year was Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. This was the last book that I read in 2025. I loved the first book of the series, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, but this book, for some reason, just had a quality that was just, it was just a 5-star read. It was just so perfect and well written. I think maybe finally seeing the growth of the relationships between Harry and his people at Hogwarts just added another layer, as well as the enemy that they faced was just so interesting. And honestly, like, I can't even imagine how someone could think of making that the enemy, but I really enjoyed it. I had such a good time. The nostalgic feel of reading Harry Potter books, I feel like, was perfectly encaptured in this book, and I definitely stand by my 5-star rating. So those are all of the 5-star reads that I had for 2025, and honestly, I think that's amazing that I had 9 5-star reads. I did the math earlier when I had 8, and it was about 10% of all of the books I read in 2025 were 5 stars. So I think now that would put me at, yeah, so exactly 12% of the books I read in 2025 were 5-star reads, and I just think that's so incredible. But on top of my 5-star reads, I also had a few 4.75 stars, or just very, very close to 5 stars. And I don't have them here. Actually, I don't have any of them. But the first one is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I discovered Ali Hazelwood in 2025 and I am so grateful for that because I love Ali Hazelwood and her writing is just so fun and entertaining. I don't think it's perfect, but it is like a guaranteed good time. The Love Hypothesis is very close to being a perfect book in my opinion. Another book on here is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins, the prequel to the Hunger Games series. That book was so incredible and I loved it so much. I think the reason I didn't give it 5 stars is because for me, I think it may have been a little bit biased just because I love the Hunger Games series so much and I loved Haymitch so much that I think I may have put in a little bit of my bias into the rating. So either way, I feel like that book was almost perfect. Another book on here is The Birth of the Dynasty by Chinazo Bado. I have not seen anyone talking about this book, but this book is so phenomenal. It, in my opinion, is very similar to A Game of Thrones. It's the first book in a new fantasy series and a new fantasy world. I received an ARC of this book from NetGalley and I was genuinely shocked with how much I loved that book. And then the last book that I have this highly rated is The Women by Kristen Hanna. I love books that make me emotional and wow, did this book make me emotional. Kristen Hanna just knows how to make me emotional, period. But I really loved reading this book. It was so dark and so sad. But same with Alchemized, there's these little moments where you have these glimmers of hope or these glimmers of happiness that just like make you keep reading. And for some reason, those just like hit me so hard and make me really love a book. Another thing I loved about that book was just how real it was. She didn't hold back on really anything, and I just thought that was incredible. And Kristen Hanna's writing is always just amazing in my opinion. Yeah, I have a ton of 4.5 stars, so I'm definitely not going to go into all of those, but of course I had Harry Potter, I had Catching Fire, and the rest of the Hunger Games trilogy. I also had My Friends by Frederick Bachman. That may be one of the best new releases of the year and I loved it so much. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good wrap up on all of my 2025 favorite books. But let's talk about my absolute number 1 top favorite book of the year. This was so hard for me. I have been filling out this bracket that I found on, I think I found it on Fable, but the template is from Sarah's Little Obsession. I think that might be on Pinterest. And it's called Battle of the Books, and I had to pick a favorite book of every month, and then that gave me my favorite book of the year. But let me just say, it was so incredibly hard for me to choose this, and ultimately it came down to Us Against You by Frederick Bachman, The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig, and Alchemized by Senlin Yu. I'm looking at this bracket right now, and I did put The Conditions of Will before Us Against You, and I don't think that was intentional because that is not, I would definitely pick Us Against You versus Conditions of Will now, but ultimately it came between these two, and this was so incredibly hard for me to choose, but I did choose The Night and the Moth, and then it came down to The Night and the Moth and Alchemized. And honestly, I don't even think I have a real answer for you, but if I have to choose, I think I have to say that Alchemized was my favorite book of the entire year. And that is very hard to say because, I mean, come on. I really still don't even know if that's really my favorite book of the year. But yeah, those are all of my favorites of 2025, and I highly recommend all of them. If you have read any of these and you loved them, please let me know down below. And if you have recommendations for me that you think I would love based on my 5-star reads, please let me know. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.